Hi, this is Tom Needham, and you are listening to Sounds, the show that brings you in depth conversations and the most fascinating voices in entertainment, music, film, and beyond. Today, we're diving into the world of comedy, storytelling, and strategy as we welcome comedian Kevin James Doyle and Emmy winning director Cory Cavin to discuss their latest theatrical production, After Endgame. This unique show, playing at the SoHo Playhouse in New York City, blends humor and high stakes chess lessons, offering a riveting look at self deception, strategy, and life lessons that we can learn from the game. Kevin James Doyle is known for his comedy specials that you might have seen on Amazon Prime. He has several. And Cory Cavin is the two-time Emmy Award winning and Writers Guild Award nominated director, writer, and producer, whose work has been seen on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, as a field producer for Late Night with Stephen Colbert, and many other shows. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Thank you so much for having us, Tom.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Tom. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so much to talk about. First of all, congratulations. The play is amazing. Tell me about how the two of you came together to work on this project.
Well, Cory and I have been doing stand-up together for over a decade. We used to run a kind of just a free bar show in the East Village called Great Times, and we would host that together and have on comedians. We had on Jim Gaffigan and Nikki Glazer and Nate Bargatze and um, Michelle Wolf, Mike Birbiglia, all these people that were like that are huge, and they would just drop into our little bar, and the show was free, and beers were $2. And Cory and I hosted that for 5 years, and through doing that show, we just developed not just like a close friendship, but also a very close working relationship. We're always talking about our material and talking about bigger projects we wanted to develop, and so Cory kind of knew this entire story. He also directed my first comedy special, The 30-Year-Old Virgin, on Amazon. And so we have always had a natural relationship, but it all stemmed out of a free bar show in the bottom of a dingy heavy metal bar in the East Village. So that's where it all came from.
Yeah, as Kevin said, we were both doing stand up, and we had some mutual friends who were in a band, and this guy was like, "You should meet this other guy that I know who does comedy." And so they kind of set us up on like a comedian's blind date. And we went to an open mic that another friend of ours, Emmy Blotnick, who's a stand-up in New York, she was hosting an open mic. We went to her open mic, and then afterward, I was going to a movie premiere, and Kevin was like going out to dinner with some people. We kind of just awkwardly stood on the street corner, and we're like, "Well, that was a lot of fun, man. We should do this again sometime." Yeah, I'll call you. And it was very, very much first date feelings. And then and then after that we started hanging out, and pretty soon decided to do that show Great Times that Kevin was talking about. And then that sort of launched us into doing a lot of shows, and we did Great Times at that same bar at Three of Cups in the East Village for 4 years. But we also did a couple of benefit shows for a nonprofit called Nomi Network that we'd gotten in touch with, and we did the benefit shows at the Bowery Ballroom. And that was one thing that I thought was so cool, is that Kevin was saying, we got to do this thing at the Bowery Ballroom at a bigger space, and we were able to bring bigger comedians and some other comedians who like weren't as well known at the time, and do it in an iconic place that we just found out Paul McCartney
Yeah, I
played
was
in
going to
last
say,
year. So
are you responsible for that?
I would like to say that I paved the way for Sir Paul to play some of the great rock
Yeah,
venues
we're
of New
the
York
we're the
City.
third and the fifth and sixth Beatle.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. Yeah, I did have a friend from North Carolina text me. That's where I'm from, and he was like, "Did you get tickets? And even if you didn't, you've graced the same stage as Sir Paul."
That is sort of a
And
big deal. I'm interested in the evolution of this play after
hmm
Endgame. Kevin, you are the writer and the star. Cory, you're the director.
Mhm.
It sounds like you've worked together in different combinations before. Tell me about how the writing process came about, and Cory, what you eventually bring to it as a director.
Sure,
Yeah,
I'll let
the
Kevin
so um, anyone who's seen the show will realize that afterwards it's a true story, um, and it's a quite a dramatic story, as far as the stakes that were involved. But I've been a comedian and a chess teacher for 12 years, and chess teaching has provided, paid my rent while I'm, hustling around doing comedy and acting. And so when I lived through the story, which took place, I was flown to Singapore to teach millionaires and billionaires how to play chess, and a pretty dramatic trip. That was March and April of 2023. When the fallout of that trip uh, took place, I was kind of took me about 6 weeks to process stuff, and then I submitted to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and when I got the acceptance into the festival, that's when I started working on the show. And in those intervening weeks when I applied for the festival, I just had probably a stack of 200 note cards that just had words on them of all the different things that I saw and the connections between the game of chess and what I had gone through. And a lot of this, a lot of the early parts of the show that are kind of the chess history that talk about Bobby Fischer and the game of the century, and
Hmm.
talk about Deep Blue and Kasparov and the Turk. Those are things that I've been telling my students for years because they're just incredibly fascinating stories. And I had a little bit of imposter syndrome the first few times I was doing the show because people were like, "This is amazing." I was like, "This is just stuff I'm reading. I'm saying stuff from history books, and I've known how incredible those stories are for years." But then when I was able to find a way to connect them to my personal experience, and there's this church in Gramercy called Calvary St. George's, and we have a relationship with the people at that church. They're very friendly to artists, and they let me do 5 workout shows in this small chapel they have. And so I was like, listen, this show, I told my friends, I was like, this show is not ready. It is not good yet, but we are in this cool space, this 150-year-old chapel, and I've got some free wine, and you can donate whatever you want. So people would donate $20 and see me stumble through the show. And at the very least, I was like, you got some free wine out of it. And those were exactly 1 year ago. February 15th was the first one of those. So and that first one was 78 minutes. And at the end, people were like, I'm not quite sure this all connects, but it was interesting. And then just from there, it was just tightening and figuring out what was going on in my head, how to tighten it so that it made sense. And now I've done the show 60 times. So that, doing it off Broadway for the first time after you've already done it 60 times, it's there. It's tight and it makes sense. So
And Corey, how did you bring your talents to this project?
Well, in the same way that Kevin had said, we've done a lot of shows together, and we did Great Times and everything, our stand-up show. We're always kind of whatever the other one is working on, we're always talking to each other about it. And so I knew he was doing this show, and I came to at least one of the workout shows, and we were kind of always talking about it. Um, and I had had some similar involvement with the when he was teaching chess. I was doing some media for the same company over in Singapore, and so I
Ah,
was aware of the story as well. And then Kevin took the show to Fringe. I went over with some friends to see his show at Fringe and to see a bunch of other shows, and and then he had told me, I want to film this. I want to, since we'd filmed his other special, he'd said, eventually I would love to film this, but I'm going to try to get a run in New York, and I'd, love for you to work with me on it. And so we kind of have just been talking about it after it's taken shape. And when he was doing it at Fringe, we would send voice notes. There's a thing on iPhones, the voice notes memo that we'll send each other those, and we always call it sending each other a podcast. And
Hmm.
so we'll be like, I'm going to send you a pod about the show. And as he was doing the show, he would send me stuff. And I remember being at the beach with my family this year, sending him a pod through my phone about his show in Edinburgh, and being like, okay, from what you said, maybe you could add this and this and this. So there's been some just like friendly, creative back and forth that kind of led to an official working on the show. And one of the things that I really enjoy, uh, aside from just performing, is producing in a sense. I kind of always never wanted to enjoy that, because when I got into comedy, I could get jobs as a producer, and so it was work. But one thing that I've come to see is, doing a show like this in the theater space. Part of producing it is setting up the whole space the way we've done it,
Hmm.
and really working on the entire experience of the show. And that has been one thing that's been really fun in not just developing the show on stage, but also developing the show and the experience in the space. That's been really cool.
One of the things that I really miss is not that they're not being made at all, but I was a huge fan of Spalding Gray. I don't know if you guys
Mm,
know him.
Oh
And,
yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
yeah.
yeah, the monologues. But one of the things I loved is he did those in theaters, but then he made movies out of his successful ones,
Mm,
and
Hmm.
they were standalone projects of themselves. And I was thinking of him a little bit as I was watching this because this is you, Kevin, telling your personal story, but then adding comedy, thoughts, valuation, mentioning other things that you've learned in your life or read. It's really an incredible show. I'm afraid our listeners maybe don't really because they haven't seen the show yet. Um, can you give them? You gave a little idea
yeah.
of what audiences can expect, but you bring your experience of being a chess teacher uh,
Hmm.
to the audience and what that's all about. You give a little bit of insight about some chess moves, but then you jump into this very dramatic personal story about going overseas to teach billionaires and a possible business opportunity that seemed too good to be true. Um, Tell us a little bit about your experience without giving away the whole show.
Yeah. So I've been teaching chess primarily to kids. I've played chess for 35 years, but um, me and my friends kind of just stumbled on a market of um, teaching kids in New York City because there's very expensive private schools, and people are very competitive about getting into these. So chess is a great thing for kids to. I've written letters of recommendation for like 5-year-olds to get into preschool, and so the prestige of chess kind of there's people around New York City that tutor music and all kinds of different things, and chess just has this cachet to it, and so we started teaching chess through storytelling and through just telling little stories about how the pieces move and strategy. And uh, pretty quickly, I was just a full-time chess tutor. And through that, uh, we went to go expand this business through this investor in Singapore. And so what the show is me teaching, and I guess just like in my experience as a chess tutor, the audience, they walk in and every single night there's 10 people that say, oh yeah, I love chess, I know exactly how to play. And they'll be on a date, or there'll be a friend that's like raising their hand, like when I'm like, are there any people that are intimidated by the show, they're scared they're not going to know what's going on, and half the audience raises their hand. So the first 30 minutes of the show are really me taking you through to understand some things about openings in chess, and then some historical things about chess, and then also some good strategies in middle game of captures and sacrifices and trades, and all of this leads into uh, this story of this investor that flew us out to Singapore to raise money to expand the business that we already had of using chess through storytelling. Um, and I always tell people when I was flyering on the street in Edinburgh, I was like, this is a show teaches you, or there was a review that they said it's not just a chess lesson, but it's a life lesson. And so
Mm.
it really ends up being about a real kind of real life chess match between me and this person who ironically had the same name as me. So when I was taking all of my notes when I was developing the show, I was like, oh my gosh, there's this guy on the exact other side of the world. His name is Kevin. We're in the I was like, I feel like if you're a religious person, I was like, literally, God is like, you are a storyteller, and I just handed you the greatest metaphor of all time. I was like, I can't mess this up. So it ends up, and that's actually a thing that I think is really important, and I learned from watching Mike Birbiglia, watching Spalding Gray, watching some of the great storytellers in England. One man's name is Daniel Kitson.
Hmm.
But like, if there's not this personal element, then you're just teaching people. And then once I get into the personal element of this story, it really turns into a just dramatic moth style, Berbiglia style storytelling show that I think is more dramatic than comedic, but still has some laughs in there. And so yeah,
Yeah.
it was a lot to balance, but I'm really happy with it. But yeah, you're gonna walk away with some chess facts and some laughs and some tugs on your heartstrings, hopefully.
It's funny, Corey. I know you've done some work with food-related shows, reality programming,
Hmm.
and such. I'm a big fan, and sometimes I'm afraid to admit it, of reality TV. I watch Big Brother, Survivor, and
Nice.
I know all the normal criticisms of those shows. How real is it or not? But I can't help but when you watch the shows and you see the strategy, like I'll always be like, well, this relates to real life in some ways, and what they're doing
Yeah.
here, you can learn a lesson from that, and you can see it in your workplace or whatever it is. And I think what this play has taught me is that's really especially true with chess. Um, it's a game, but it is in many ways, as you said, like a metaphor for life, or can be.
Yeah.
What is it about chess that, besides the game being just really an engaging, mentally stimulating activity, what is it about moves in chess that can teach you lessons in life as well?
I mean, I Kevin is a much better chess player than I am, and I've learned, and our friends that had worked at the company where they developed all of this, they're all much better chess players than I am. But one thing that I have learned, and then I'll let Kevin speak on it because he has been teaching it for so long. I think that it teaches you not only how to move forward in a game or a strategy or anything you're doing in life, but if you look specifically at a game of chess, it teaches you how to move forward and either react or respond to what's happening. But the other thing is, it teaches you after the game is over how to go back and see what you did wrong or what you could have done and how that would have changed things. And I think in life, you can't undo the past, but you can at least look back and be mindful of what happened. And I mean, Kevin and I played like a week ago. We were prepping for the show. We just played on Lee Chess, which is a website kind of like chess.com. And he showed me, he was like, second move, you went here. And that allowed me to do this. And then it took a while to win. But had you done a different second move, that would have changed everything going forward. And so that is that's one thing that I've learned, is that you can always kind of learn to open the strategy of how things are going to unfold, and you can learn uh, how things what you did wrong and what to do next time.
Yeah, I was studying a game in preparation for the show, and we've basically created a chess museum inside the theater. And I would say that it started as a little idea, and now I'm like, this could be in the Whitney. This is it was very good. But I was studying a game from the 1850s by Paul Morphy, who was one of the original great American chess masters. And I'm like, I'm studying once you're studying a game, you're studying what happened inside a guy's head at the time, 175 years ago, you know?
Mm.
And and I think that is what is fascinating. I talk in the show about the game of the century, which is Bobby Fischer at 13 against Donald Byrne, who's a grandmaster. And there is a single move that he made that at the time everyone thought was a mistake, and it turned out to be one of the most brilliant moves ever made. And so I think that there's something about every single game that you have, whether you're if you have it recorded, which now with computer chess, your games are recorded and it's easier to study them. That those games from 1850, thank God those people wrote the chess notation down so we can study them, or else they would just be in the ether. But every single game is different. After about 13 moves in, no chess game is ever the same. There's as many chess possibilities in games as there are grains of sand in the sea. And so I think the metaphor for life is that there's a sea of possibilities, and you as a human being have an opportunity to make the best decisions possible with what you're given in any given situation, and whether it's against another person or whether it's against um, you know forces outside your control, you are able to look at possibilities and go down these different paths. And um, I think what I needed to do, because of the story I was given, was tell a story that I don't think is often told in chess. And I think Queen's Gambit is a good example, is that, a lot of times it's like, I was the one thinking two steps ahead. I was the one who was the master planner in the end. And that's not necessarily what takes place. A lot of times you think you're three steps ahead and the person was seven and you got destroyed, but you can still learn from that. So there's just a reason why there's so much fascination of this game after years, and I think it's because you can input the human experience and all of the different options of what that is in there, and get there's not one or two lessons you can learn from chess. There's about 50,000, and you have to choose which ones, figure out which ones you're learning in those moments.
The other thing that really like very much interests me about the two of you is it seems that you both probably have a lot of showbiz friends. You're both involved in show business in a variety of different ways and have had different ups and downs, I would imagine. But in telling this story, I think there's going to be a lot of people, probably in all industries, but I think in particular in the show business world, that will be able to relate a little bit to this idea of, or I guess even people in business, but anyone who's trying to make it in a competitive, exciting business world, where the rewards are very, very enticing. One has to be very careful, and even very smart and talented people can get hurt along the way. What is it about show business? I mean, you're both in it. Um, that can be dangerous for people with even a lot of talent as they strive to make their mark in their careers.
I think I want to let Cory. I'll set Cory up and then he can talk about it. But I I want to set him up first by being Cory's a few years older than me, and when I first met him, I was like, I hope that I can make a connection and network. And then it turned out we just became really, really close friends. But um, I I've heard of some interviews with people that are just thankful that they had more success later in life. And I'm 39 now, and I now we know people that it's like I know people that have Oscars and Grammys and play stadiums and have been in movies, or 2 degrees away from this person or that person. And there is something really enticing about being close to money or power or fame. And especially when you're younger, especially when you're first get to New York. I got to New York at age 23. Um, and when you're first there, you're just like, oh my gosh. So you, it's easy to make these little moral, little more like just shave off these little things, not be yourself or not stand by something because you want something that's really, really difficult to achieve, which is basically work in an industry that has like a 0.01% chance of success. And the same was true in the business world. The thing about when I met Cory that really grounded me as a human being is there are these comedians that I was just like, oh my gosh, when we first started our show in the basement, I was like, what? That'd be awesome if we could get Nikki Glazer. And he's like, oh yeah, I should text her. And I was like, you know Nikki Glazer? He's like, yeah, she's my friend. And that to me, now Nikki's even another level of fame with the
Yeah.
Golden Globes and stuff, and she's incredible. But um, there was a number of people that were like comedy heroes of mine, like Tony Hale or from Arrested Development and different things. And Cory was like, oh yeah, I know Tony from this or whatever. And so, and Cory is not only talented, but truly, if there was a poll out there, people would be like, he's one of the nicest and most generous and thoughtful people around. And I think that I've always been amazed that he doesn't seem to have the same values that someone that's like, oh my gosh, I need to get to this person or I need this success or whatever. He's always been very grounded. And for me being a little younger, he's kind of been a mentor and an example of what is most important in life. And so, but you see a lot of that kind of skeezy, kind of manipulative behavior in show business, like all around. And it's been nice to have a rock and like a focus that is outside of all of that fleeting things, those fleeting things. So,
Mm.
Pawns need
Yeah.
friends.
yes, exactly. Pawns need friends.
Ponzi. Well, that's a big part of the show, actually. That I mean, that's a big point in the show, about sticking together and pawns needing
Hmm.
friends. That's so true. Um, yeah, I mean, Kevin and I are definitely. I am a little bit older than Kevin. Kevin's 39. I'm 81, and so I've been in this business a long time, guys.
Yeah.
I actually did a lot of my work starting directing Spalding Gray, and I'm just kidding. Um, I would
When I
actually,
first worked with Groucho, he,
when they kicked me out of the Brothers.
yeah.
No, I mean, I moved to New York a couple years before Kevin. I've been in New York about 20 years now, and I I think I mean, I think one thing that, like you're saying with the glitziness and stuff of show business, a few things are one. I forget what context you were just saying it in, Kevin, but or Tom, but one of you, you said the word fleeting, and one thing
Hmm.
that I have definitely seen is that things can be really fleeting. I mean, Kevin said this to me years ago, but I was working on a late night show. I worked on Nikki Glazer, her late night show. She had a late night show called Nikki and Sarah Live on MTV, um, with another comedian named Sarah Schaefer that I was good friends with. And, we had 3 seasons and then, or 2 seasons, and then we didn't get picked up. And it was like all of a sudden didn't work for 9 months. And so it is an industry that can be really fleeting because you can be, uh, it's also, an industry where it can be flashy, and part of it is you're at events. You're at the Super Bowl or you're at an award show because you're working there, and then you go home to your normal apartment, and a lot of jobs are contract. And so I think, um, the the fleetingness, it can be kind of a wake up call, and to try to stay grounded, and then to also, I think one of the biggest things about this show and other shows you've worked on is that, and I've heard uh, really and experienced really successful comedians and showbiz people say this, but it does sound like an old Hollywood adage, but like you really have to focus on how good the work is,
Mm,
Mhm.
because it is very possible, to go out and Kevin and I used to go to open mics, and I would get so uh, insecure because there would be, some really, really funny people there, and it's kind of a scene, and you would see a lot of like cool people there. Um, Within the open mic, and then you realize, some of those people end up quitting stand up or quitting comedy, or they're just like, I'm not into this, and then they move on, and things can be, if you're not really focusing on why you're doing it and trying to make a good product, all the other things can kind of fade away really quickly. um and I I also think Kevin mentioned Tony Hale, and Tony was someone that I was really fortunate to meet early on through some other friends. And I remember I was working on this independent movie years ago, and one thing that Tony Hale had said, and he had had a ton of success at this point. Like Kevin said, he was on Arrested Development, and but he had said he said he considered this his Oprah speech, and he was like, anytime uh, when I was on my first big TV show, I always want to go back and tell myself to be content where you are
mm,
in your career. It's so easy to want to look forward and say, well, if I get this and get this, and the next thing will be this. And it's like, just be content in whatever the place you're at and the job you're at and the thing you're doing now, um, which I think allows you to then enjoy, what you're doing. And probably nine times out of 10, that will get you further to the next thing.
Mhm.
yeah.
I mean, Kevin and I yesterday were stressing out so much because we're setting up this chess museum, and Kevin said the chess museum could be in the Whitney, and I think it definitely could be in the Whitney if the Whitney only used IKEA frames for all their art. But but like, but we're there framing like a tons of things, and hanging them up, have an X-Acto, cutting out all the art cards, and I'm just so stressed. And then we're walking to Blick Art Supplies to buy more things an hour and a half before the show. And then we got back to the theater, and finally there was kind of this release of like, oh, this is so fun to get to be able to do this right now.
That's
And
awesome.
if we only got to do this for a couple shows, that'd be great. A lot of people don't get to do that kind of thing. So it's just really
Mhm.
nice to get to go through the hard work and it be very incredibly stressful, and then be really fun uh, in the moment to get to do it, and just see how it goes. It's really a privilege, and I think it's easy to forget that. And I bet it's got to be even harder to keep track of that if you get to the levels of uh, you know
Yeah.
being the
Mega
host of the
fame.
Oscars, mega fame, that kind of thing. I think those people really have something dialed in to be able to sort of stay true to what they're doing, and
Mhm.
stay true to having a normal life
And that's really
as much as
wise.
they can.
Yeah. Let me ask you one more thing. This film raises so many interesting points and touches on so many major themes. One thing that is dominating the news these days is AI, and and all this new technology. And one of the things that you mentioned in the play, Kevin, is that with all the advances throughout history in technology, with computers and AI and all that, one of the places that people always go to see whether technology is surpassing humans is chess. Chess is
Mhm.
the chess is the place to go to see where we're at. And right now I think people are freaking out about where the world is going due to AI. What have you learned about technology and chess, and what humans can still do, and what it's taught us that maybe we can't do any longer?
The first thing that comes to mind, which will connect, but I remember when I was in theater school, everyone would be fighting over the same over monologues or songs and for auditions and stuff. And people are like, I heard Jordan is doing the monologue from Edward Albee's play. I'm doing that. And I remember that far back. I remember being like, yeah, it doesn't it doesn't matter. It's how you do it. Like, so if you do the same monologue and you do it differently, then it's going to be different. And And I think that that is partially where we're at. And I say this from an artistic perspective. Um, I think I think when I look around at AI and stuff, I'm just like, cool. I've already seen ways that it sucks when it comes to writing. And even some people have been like, oh my gosh, it can write this so well. It's like, yeah, but that's that's fine. Is there humanity behind it? Chat GPT could write a term paper, but could it write a novel that I want to read? And so I think that that humanity behind things from an artistic perspective really doesn't scare me, because I'm just like, you know what? Maybe I don't really make any money doing my art now anyway. So I'll just stick to that. But I think chess with AI is one of those um, it's one of those markers. Like it's very it with chess, it had to do one thing. In 1996, it's like IBM had to program Deep Blue to do one thing, which is play chess. So within these rules, and it ended up beating Gary Kasparov using the strategy was called brute force, which is like it could calculate more than Gary Kasparov could. And so, yeah, AI is going to change things when it comes to brute force, but um, but that's the same as anything with brute force. It's like that's going to be helpful in a lot of things, and then there's going to be um, the human aspect of things that won't change. And there's I, I don't know. A few years ago, when Andrew Yang was talking about stuff like this, I was like, "What's he talking about?" Now I'm like, "Oh yeah, there's going to be so many jobs lost the next few years." Um, and I have no position to tell people what they should do. I would only from like an artistic perspective, I would just be like, this stuff is going to wash itself out from an artistic perspective, and there's going to be people that still retain their humanity in their art, that it's going to stand out and even be more unique. Um, but it is. I'd be lying. I'm as concerned as everyone else when it comes to society, but when it comes to personal work, it kind of just I feel that same as like the theater person. It's like, all right, well, my stuff will stand out. Tom Waits is my one of my favorite musicians,
Yeah.
and when he learned about like beatboxing and stuff, his son was into rap, and so on his album Real Gone,
Hmm.
he did some beatboxing, and he learned about sampling, and his son was like, yeah, you just like you do it 8 beats and then you sample it. And he's like, well, no. He's like, he would beatbox for like a 7-minute song, because he's like it's going to change. I don't want it repeated. I want those misses, and I want those spits, and I want those the different variety between that whole 7 minutes to be me beatboxing the whole time, not the sampling of it. And I think about that because I think about the mistakes in our work and the things that I'm like, oh, I messed up that line. Like those are things that AI is not going to calculate. And those are the things that sometimes are the best moment in a show or best moment in a song. And so I think of that Tom Waits thing, and I think about the theater thing, and it just reminds me that like it's not about being perfect, and it's not about throwing something into a computer that like spits out a story. It's about like where the story in the person's brain and heart came from, and then how it relates to society. Like I don't know, that one's a little above my pay grade.
Yeah, it's interesting the AI tie-in with chess, because there's a point in the show where Kevin talks about a very early tie-in with AI and chess, way before we're dealing with in our current moment, and I think you can kind of see. I mean, this is probably not the same thing as AI, but there's histories all through there's stories all throughout history, even the Tower of Babel, where it's like people are like, we're going to build this thing, and there's old myths and things where humans have always been trying to look at some sort of thing that will fix everything, um, only to find that it doesn't, and it makes things maybe worse. Um, and also at the same time, like I was talking to someone about AI and all the things it's going to change, and I was saying, in some ways, I think Microsoft Excel is its own version of AI where it's adding the cells for you. And I was like, it's a tool. I'm terrible at spreadsheets. I would much rather do this version of it. Now, I'm sure an AI scientist could look at me and after 5 minutes of laughing about how I don't understand it, it'd be like, you don't get how powerful this is. But I think, like Kevin had said, that it's going to change so many things. Um, and the humanity of things is, like he had said, and I think the humanity of things is what matters in uh, good art, and it also is what matters so much more now in person to person and theater connections and things like that. That makes it more exciting. Um, uh, and I think chess is such a mental human game, which is why it's been so interesting to see um, how a computer could take the human aspect and make it uh, elevate it mentally to where we take this as far as it needs to be taken, and then you kind of strip a human thing away from there, and it messes it up a little bit.
It's crazy. I mean, um, just like in chess, how the computer can learn all the moves so that it anticipates exactly what you're going to do. These tech companies now are just gathering so much information about our personal lives that I'm wondering if in the future, like they're just going to know what you're going to be doing in your personal lives
Mhm.
before you even do it. Career wise, psychologically, personally. But these are bigger topics. This play is so great because it gets you thinking about so many different topics. It's one of the best things I've seen this year. I want to really highly recommend after Endgame. Um, Cory, Kevin, tell us a little bit about where people can find out about this production.
Well, people can go to the SoHo Playhouse, which I just want to say, incredible theater, very supportive of artists. I've seen some of the best things I've ever seen there. Fleabag had their New York run there. Nanette by Hannah Gadsby, Just for Us, Alex Edelman. It's an incredible theater. So we're honored to be there. And it plays February 11th, yesterday, to March 8th. And we are in the downstairs intimate room. It's only 60 to 70 seats, and it feels like a small little club. We've turned it into a chess museum that covers kind of some of the high points of chess throughout the past few hundred years, and it's every night at 7 p.m. And Cory and I are always hanging out after the show, playing chess with people, taking pictures, and showing people around our chess museum. So it's playing every night at 7 p.m. I got 20 more shows, and if we sell them out, we'd be happy to add more. But right now, we're just trying to get people in the door for the shows we have now. And
Cory,
it's on Van Dam Street, Van Dam and 6th Avenue, right in Soho, off the
Mhm.
Spring Street stop on the ACE.
Yep.
any last words, Cory?
I come to the show, and if you come to the show, please talk with us afterward. I mean, we had a woman at the show last night who we have a poster for the Kasparov Deep Blue movie, and it turned out this woman had heard about the show, and she worked in on-set production sound for the movie, and was talking to Kevin, and she was like, "Oh yeah, that's the movie." And it's wild that the people whose stories and we had a guy come to the show last night who had just moved to New York and was starting to do comedy. His dad had heard about the show because a chess writer had written about it, and he was like, "My dad told me to come to this. I'm just starting comedy. What's you guys' advice in doing comedy in New York?" And he's gonna be fine. This
Yeah,
kid's gonna host the Oscars. But
Wow.
yeah.
no, it was a really great thing to just speaking with this AI conversation we're having, uh, to go and connect with people after the show and talk about why they came there, what their interest in chess is, what their interest in theater. That's one of the most fun things, and that's why we created this chess museum, is to get to hang out and talk about that after the show. So please come and talk to us. Tell us what you think.
Cory, Kevin, thank you so much for your time. And once again, great job. And hopefully we can speak again in the future.
Would love to. Thank you so much, Tom.